what you were saying is that there is a separation between what computers can do really well and what humans will do. What's your sense
Absolutely.
of, specifically when it comes to software development, what
Mm,
will
mm.
remain in the human domain and what will be automated by technology?
I still think there's this sense. So for me, it comes back to, yes, what does it mean sort of to be human, and what do humans do really well? And so in that regard, I think there's the two key things for me are kind of creativity and intuition. And I think that those are two things that AI are going to, at the moment, as I said, no predictions for the future, but as far as I can see it, I can't imagine that that's going to be challenged. So what does that mean specifically for software engineering? Well, when it comes to creativity, what I've found in my experience and talking with others is that when it comes to sort of boilerplate code, AI is fantastic. That sort of happy path, you want to set up an Express app, or write some kind of basic React front end code, like fantastic. There is so much of that out there on the internet that's it's been trained on. And to be honest, I mean, I did a lot of React, so I say this, I do enjoy writing that, but at the same time, certainly the boilerplate stuff, you know, that wasn't the fun bit of engineering, really. It was something you had to do. You had to get all the scaffolding in place. But often you were doing all that to then really get to the juicy stuff, which is often the kind of domain logic, what I would like always talk about, with the engineers and startups I work with, what is the thing that only you can do? What is the code that no one else in the world is going to be writing? And I still think that, and often, and I worked on projects where that was probably like 5 or 10% of the code that we were writing, and 5 or 10% of like the entire time. Like that was the really crucial bit that really impacted the business and like delivered that. But there was all this scaffolding that had to go around it. And I think what AI does is it really it does the heavy lifting on the scaffolding. So much of that scaffolding now can be you want that boilerplate app, you want to, and especially when it comes to things like prototyping, getting things up and running, incredible to just really accelerate that. And I talk a lot about, and this is again, taken very much from Kent Beck and his thinking, that's that concept of optionality, right? And what optionality boils down to when it comes to software is, you can have $1 today, or you can have $10 tomorrow. And I think what AI is fantastic at is, and there's always a trade-off between these. So if you focus on $1 today, that's great, money in the bank, but it's harder to, you pay a cost that is actually harder to change in the future.
Yeah,
And good software engineering, good software design is about making systems easier to change. The easier it is to change a system, the more valuable it is tomorrow. So
yeah,
but that obviously requires an upfront investment to do. So I think AI is fantastic at generating dollars today. And what I still think that when it comes to that kind of creativity of going, what's the really unique case of this business, this market, this team, these individuals involved? I don't think there's a context window that's ever going to be
yeah,
large enough to fit all these variables in, to make that trade-off between what is needed now, what's going to be needed in the future. I think this is, and being creative about to come up with
yeah.
innovative solutions, not outside of the kind of
Mhm.
statistically most probable path, that I still think lays in the
Yeah.
domain of humans.
Alex, I largely agree with you, but just to challenge you slightly on this,
Yes.
the thinking that the skill of software engineering lies in creating maintainable systems. And as a software engineer, I very much know what you mean. Write good
Mm.
code will be easier to deal with it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But uh, this assumes that code is expensive to write because it's difficult generally for humans to do. So if I
Mm.
know I'm going to maintain the system tomorrow, I will write clean code, documentation, specification, and think about the architecture so that it is easier to do it tomorrow. But
Mm.
if AI makes it easier to generate code, what if uh, this logic breaks? What if I
Mm.
can take some shortcuts today purely because I know that tomorrow, if I need to change something, I can ask O3 or Gemini 2.5 or whatever, GPT-7 next year, to say, just rebuild the entire system from scratch.
Mm.
It's like the
Yeah.
analogy I've got in my mind is like, if I've got a leaking shower, instead of fixing a hose in the shower, I would ask someone to rebuild the entire building
Mm. Mm.
and
Mm.
as a side effect, fix the shower.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting challenge, and I think it's interesting because it resonates with when I first started in software engineering. after Makers Academy. I remember going to a conference, and this idea of the actually compare, the difference between like software and sort of hardware, or people still use kind of architectural language, but when you're
Mhm.
designing a building, you can't just throw something up and then just destroy it all and build something all tomorrow. But with it, to an extent, with software you can. I think that that's now taken to the next level with AI. I guess, look, this is where I guess my, from my experience with a fractional CTO, right, is at the moment, one of the big things, stuff like regulation, is
Mhm.
there's a lot of boring stuff that
Yeah.
goes into building anything really, and I think that making, there's a wider conversation about impact of AI on society and regulation, how that adapts, and that's a bigger conversation than we probably have today, or at least right now. But I think when it comes to, yes, you could try something and then just go, well, I'm going to tear it down and build it up tomorrow. But a lot of the things you need to have in place, certainly if you're working any regular, I work with health tech in particular at the moment, so
Mhm.
so quite a regulated space. You just simply won't be able to, well, for a while, I think, be able to get Gemini 3.5, whatever it will be, to go actually recreate me this entire app with from scratch, and make it fully compliant, make it auditable, be able to, unlock the black box so that I can say that when this answer was generated, or like making so I think that the it's a good challenge, and it
Yeah.
may be well be the future. I still think that there will be certain boring bits that you will need to have a human in the loop. You'll need
Yeah.
someone, I think there's also a really interesting example, which or idea, which I'm not enough of an economist to talk at length on, but when it comes to comparative advantage, we're already beginning to see this. you know there's this idea of, obviously got the $200 a month for ChatGPT, for OpenAI now. Plans for $2,000 a month, $20,000 a month. And is there a point where, I still think it all comes back to this trade-off space. You might still be saying, yeah, you know what, just tear it down, go up again, but you're still going to be working with an economic, these aren't free. Unlike normal code, what's interesting with, AI is once with normal code, I call it classic code, once it's up and running, it will run forever, infinitely, almost for free, right? You might pay some cloud provider costs,
Mhm.
whatever it is, but essentially it's just running perfect. And the
Yeah.
only whereas that's not the case with AI. Now, obviously, AI can generate that code, but again, when it comes to maintainability, really, if you want the humans out of the loop, and you've got some agentic system that's monitoring it, updating it, doing
Mhm.
package updates, fixing those, that's all still going to have a cost. I think, I mean, at this point, it's still in that kind of early Uber mode where, lots of stuff is free or very competitive on price. And once that collapses a bit more, does that price start
Mhm.
going up? And then, so I think there's a whole, I agree, I think there's a whole new world coming, but I still think this, essentially for me, the definition of software engineering, the core idea is working in this trade-off space of optionality. And I think that that's
Yeah.
going to be persistent, and that
Mhm.
it's going to require a human to be making, even if it's
Yeah.
running 10 companies at a time with all the
Mhm.
that may be it, but you're still going to have a human going, at what
Yeah.
point, what decision do I make, what judgment call do I make, and where do I draw this line? I still
Yeah.
think that's going to be true.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you is that even though AI is already having an incredible impact on software development, there is still space for human creativity, human judgment, human decision making, not least because we're dealing with the real world with its messiness, regulations, interface with other systems which are not just software. And
Mm.
when it comes to actual problems on the ground, it's not as easy as just generating boilerplate code that might look very impressive for greenfield projects and demos, but
Mm.
not for anything which is actually a large scale and has some real um, stakes.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, one of the key things, what is going to be interesting, I think where the moats change now, previously there was a case whereby, maybe essentially the traditional moats of, it takes, it's expensive to hire a team of developers and build something and get it into users' hands, and that bit has just been obliterated. Right now, it's really cheap and really easy to spin up your MVP and start getting feedback. And the kind of the trend I see is you're going to have absolute chaos in many ways, like everyone creating their own custom software, which is brilliant. I actually think is really exciting. And of this, there will a lot will fail, a lot won't get anywhere, but some works. And you'll find, I think, people without much coding experience, without any sort of basically making products that people are paying for. And I think you actually get this whole new kind of economic marketplace or economic reality where you've got people who essentially have built something that is making money and is very much on the dollar today, making money, and then they're going, but I can't, I don't have the understanding to now take this to the next level to make it,
Yeah.
the context window is just
Yeah.
it's too much, it's too complex now, and I can't. And it goes back to that point of you can't the $10 tomorrow isn't there because you can't change it easily, and that's where you need someone, definitely, all engineers will need to be adept at using AI systems. But I think probably the real skill of AI of software engineers when it comes to AI is understanding their limitations and understanding where to sort of turn the autopilot off. I always think about like the Star Wars as Luke's going down. So use the Force, turn off the auto. He takes off and trust yourself and trust your knowledge, experience, intuition to go, hold on, it's telling me all this stuff, but I know this is the right. I
Yeah.
know from evidence this is the right way to do it, and being able to trust in that, and that's where you'll deliver value, and that's where as I said, I think it's a new pie that's being created, that's being baked at the moment,
Yeah.
and so it's a scary time, but I think there's a lot of excitement as well. I think there's going to be a lot less. There's going to be lots of really interesting stuff to work on, and stuff that, most importantly, the hardest thing as a software engineer is working on something for, really putting your heart on, and then it just flops or like never sees the light of day, or you build and actually people don't want it. And I think what's really exciting about AI is I think unlocks this idea that we're going to be able to tell very quickly what people
Yeah.
really want and need, and you're only going to be expending software engineering, effort when you essentially people want it, and that's an exciting place to be.
Yep. That's an incredible insight and also a wonderful point to wrap up because we're already slightly over time. Uh, Alex, really enjoyed doing this live with you. My first ever on Substack, but definitely not going to be my last. Great format, and we should do this or maybe on a longer podcast at some point in the
I'd love
future.
to. And yeah, thanks for bearing with the technical difficulties. And yeah, absolute pleasure, Jenny. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you, Alex.
Bye bye.
Speak soon.